Okay, so this is the first time I'm actually using this webcam that Noel got me for um, recording video. And actually, this is more for a work type of thing, but I'm going to use it a lot to make videos. It just makes things a whole lot easier. She had gotten me this bigger camera that I wanted, and I told her that cameras are used for different purposes. Like, I got this one, which is a GoPro. That's used for if I'm going to go to the beach or dash point or something like that. And if I want to get close to the water, I don't have to worry about dropping it. Because if I do, it's all good. So that's what that one's for. The other one is more for if I'm walking around on the street, or if I want to do something that's going to be like a festival, like a long type deal, because the battery's a lot more beefier. This one is used for this type of purpose as well as meetings. I had a 9-hour Zoom meeting the other day. So things like this is what this is for. But anyway, you guys don't care. The sound may be different than what you're used to. I can tweak it a little bit, but this is kind of what it's going to be. I do have a microphone down here. I may actually test it with that eventually to see how well that works. But overall, this is going to be kind of what you're going to be seeing and hearing. With that said, Tacoma has been trying to figure out its whole zoning situation. We are literally out of land for the most part. There are still areas of the city where you can go and there's a few acres that are available. Unlike Seattle, there are still areas of the city where you can really do some development. And these are vacant lots that have never been touched, or they may have actually had something on them in the past and they're redoing it. There's a lot of different things. And so you do have areas in the city where development can occur, and I expect that to happen in the future. Some of that's on the east side of the city. Some of that is along the spine, as I call it, which is Pacific Avenue. You have some of that as you get closer to downtown, and there's other areas where you may have a lot or two that you can actually do some development on, and you're seeing that. But one of the things that the city of Tacoma is really trying to grapple with is the expanded amount of housing that is going on in the city. Or not the expanded amount, but the expanded amount of population that's going on in the city. And when you don't have a lot of space, you really run this risk of pushing people out, because folks need to actually have a house. They're going to go out elsewhere to get a home. And here's the reason why I always push downtown or the city itself, is mainly due to sprawl. I lived in cities that had massive amounts of sprawl, and it's not fun. You have to build a lot of highways, interstates. It's just not good, right? And having a more denser city from a transportation standpoint and walkability standpoint is much better. So it's always a good idea for something like that to be pushed. Now, with that said, Tacoma was looking at ways to do this. They wanted to literally take areas of the city and make it where it would be different areas throughout the city, where it would basically allow for the middle housing. Middle housing is basically that honey spot. You're not single family, you're not a huge apartment building, but you're in the middle. You basically are duplex. You are a townhome development where there's maybe 3 or 4 townhomes, but they're all kind of clustered right there. Or, they have a courtyard type of deal where you have like a main building that has 3 or 4 families, and then you have some that are private, more private. So they're on the bottom floor and there's just one floor, and you have 2 or 3 families on each side, and in the middle is a courtyard. There's all these different types of things that were a part of that. And so the big issue that people had was, well, if I have a single family home, the language in that would have allowed for a developer to build a 3-story or a 3-story small apartment building. the way that it was originally written. And folks didn't really like that because they're seeing what's going on in some of the high valued areas of the city and areas that people really want to live in. They're seeing a lot of that where, development is on both sides of a house and they shade out the house in the middle. And so uh, there's a lot of pushback. Folks understand there's a lot of issues here and that housing is one of those core problems. But they also don't, and rightfully so, they don't necessarily want their home to be shaded out by buildings, nor have that many people to the right or left of them. And that makes perfect sense. So the city basically paused that whole entire process and said, we need to review this, but we have to do something quick because developments happen all the time here. And they want to make sure that they have language that's ready to go to address a lot of the issues. Because some of these, the way that it is now, it is difficult oftentimes in certain areas of the city that is zoned single family to do anything like that. You really can't. There are certain areas of the city where it's mostly residential, but you're able to have mixed use buildings, and people may not be aware of that. So it's often a good idea, especially along a transit corridor or a main street. Even though it's a residential street, it could also be zoned for multifamily use. You never know. So you always want to make sure you check. So the city now finally, or they're going through a staged process to say, let's kind of look at this. Seattle is doing the same thing. When you look at Seattle, there's a big difference, right? Seattle, I think, what is it, 70% of Seattle is single family homes and 30% is multifamily. And so you can kind of look at that and say, wow, that's 70%, that's a lot. But when you look at Seattle and you look at downtown and you look at some of the other areas like Ballard and some of these other places where they've really started to bulk up around the university area, you can understand that 30% of what you're seeing in Seattle are mid-rises or greater. And some of that even has went into Greenwood and close to Shoreline and all of that. A lot of the development is starting to spread throughout the city, and you have a lot of mid-rises, and you are seeing, and so you have that difference of 70 single families, 30% mid-rises. Tacoma, on the other hand, is mostly a single-family city. Keep in mind, these numbers were way different not long ago. It is a single family city that's drastically changing pretty quickly. Here it's 90-10, right? It's 90% single family homes, 10% mid rises. That has changed drastically just in the last little bit of time, and it's going to continue to keep changing. There are so many projects in the pipeline that are proposed, funded, and all of that. They're waiting on the permit process. If you go downtown now, you see a lot of projects under construction, and so those aren't factored into this number, into this figure, right? There are some 3 people for every 1 unit, and in Tacoma, 3 people for every 1 unit. Now, with those types of numbers, you can see why the city has this urgency to build. The problem is balancing affordability with the number of units being developed, because obviously a developer wants to do what's going to be the best thing for them and for their portfolio, the possibilities of selling that property, all of that. I mean, that's where a lot of developers get their money. It's not necessarily from holding on to a building forever. A lot of them will build a building, build a project, get all the stuff done, and then sell it to another company, and they obviously make a pretty hefty profit. They're able to continue to keep building. So then they do the next project, and so then they're able to build 2 more buildings, and then they sell those 2, and they're able to do 4 or 5 more. That's how they do it. So you're seeing a lot of changing of hands. Apartment buildings now, you're seeing a lot of that. This year, Tacoma hit the record as far as the price for apartment being sold. A building was sold, so it hit its record. I don't think that that's going to be uncommon. And so you're seeing that there's a lot of different issues here that really, as a city, you're going to have to grapple with, right? So, in addition to the housing affordability question, and also the density question, the city also has to deal with homelessness because it is a chronic issue here. There's no question that there's a major problem, not only in Tacoma, but throughout this region. But in Tacoma specifically, we have a major issue in terms of homelessness. So the city is trying to figure out how to work all of those particular systems. And even one of the things that came up was a ban on pitching tents and things like that. They call it camping on private property and public property. And so, in terms to private property, yeah, you can tell someone, get off my property. When it comes to public property, that's the question. And public property is also the planting strips. So that is the issue. You have some places, not here where I live, because the planting strip is really about that wide, maybe 3 feet wide, something like that. You don't have as much of a concern because anytime it touches the sidewalk, if a tent touches the sidewalk, that's an issue because there has to be enough room for someone in a wheelchair or what have you to be able to freely go by. You can't be blocking the sidewalk. So certain areas, people don't have to really worry about that. They have to worry about it when you have some of these larger, wider planting strips, right? And so you see where in some areas of the city, in some areas have these wide planting strips, no problem. But you see where in certain areas like hillside, parts of hilltop, where they have some of these wider planting strips, and there has been tents that have been pitched right by the homeless or at public parks or park and ride areas that aren't really used much anymore. Like Tacoma has a lot of throwbacks when it was trying to develop everything it needed to develop. So you have all these areas that are public spaces, and so trying to introduce how a law to control that is one of the things the city has to grapple with. So there's so many different things being thrown into the mix at one time, and it's a very complicated issue. So the city tackling this home situation in terms of everybody. So no matter what, whether you're homeless or not, this is basically talking about how do we grapple with getting more density in the city without it impacting everybody. Now, I personally think that downtown should be a completely different zone all on its own, and there should not be any sort of restrictions whatsoever on development, and that actually that developers who build a certain density, certain height, should get dramatic perks. That's my thoughts because you're able to put more people in a smaller footprint. I think the city, on the other hand, is saying that they have no control over pricing as far as what rents are being charged. True. And they also don't necessarily have a lot of control in how big or how tall a building is. But I think that they do. There are certain instances where they can say this area here is zoned for that particular height. More than likely, developers are going to say no because the higher you get, the more expensive it is. And they're still trying to rationalize if Tacoma is really worth that type of money. We're slowly starting to get there. So eventually the mid-rises will give way to bigger projects. But until then, this particular city, Tacoma, has to navigate with all of these small mid-rises when we have 3 people waiting for 1 unit. You see what I'm saying? So it's a cat and mouse game. So they've done away with the whole notion of single-family homes. That whole term has been basically moved away, and they changed it to, what is it called? Hold on, let me find it. I missed it here. Let me look. Of course, I get messages too, right whenever I'm trying to look at something, so those pop up. Let's see. Now, keep in mind too that Seattle is also doing away with its with some of its zoning situations as well. So both cities are tackling the the whole zoning thing, right? Tacoma's a lot more aggressive with it though, and Tacoma is now calling it low scale, mid scale. Okay, so low scale are going to be basically your regular homes, but also it's going to be a duplex or a fourplex. So that's where, for some people, it's still going to be an issue, right? Because now, if a developer comes in and says, I'm building low scale, they can technically go right next door, even here, right next door. And if there's a building there, a home there, they can tear it down and literally build a duplex. Now, that duplex could have, one story, or it could be two story. It could be even possibly three story. But that's what that means. So their definition of low scale is going to be beyond just a single family home, because that whole notion of single family home means exactly that. You can't have anything other than that unless you go in and get approval from the zoning commission and all that type of stuff, and it's a case by case basis. This basically opens that up a little bit more and say that you can be a couple of different things, a townhome, and still be in that low scale category. Mid scale, they give a definition of it, but basically it's when you have a building that can go up to as much as 4 stories tall. And it has a couple of different features to it, a certain amount of units, that type of thing. That is also interesting. And then, of course, I'm sure there's high scale. It doesn't give too much about what that is, but I'm thinking that's going to be your mid rises on up. It's a very aggressive approach, but I think it's going to be one that is, for now, a good place to start. We have to do something in terms of just the overall um, problem with housing. When you have, again, 3 people waiting on a unit, it becomes a concern, and it's not slowing down. I mean, even with all of these projects that are being developed downtown, talk about like downtown Tacoma could basically take on maybe 12 more restaurants, and then it's done. It could take on maybe 3 or 4 more breweries, and then that's kind of it. And then you start to max out. It can take on maybe 1 more or 2 more co-working spaces, and then it's kind of becoming a little bit saturated, right? When it comes to mid-rises or housing or apartments, there's not a cap yet. You know what I mean? Like, there's not me saying, like, you know what, another 5 more and we're good. I do think if we had some buildings of height, let's say 20-story buildings, and each one of those buildings held 300 people. I think that if we popped in like 4 or 5 of those downtown, it would make a massive dent in the housing needs, a massive dent. But I still would not say that that's all you would need. It would just make a huge impact. That's the one area where I can say we just don't have enough. It doesn't matter if it's downtown or outside of that. I think downtown should be wide open, in my opinion. I also think along Pack Avenue should be wide open in terms of the density. I think that there should be no rules on that, given the fact that it's a high commercial corridor. And BRT is going to go through there as well. So to me, there are certain areas where this makes good sense. I think the Lincoln District's another one where really density should continue to go up quite a bit. There are certain key spaces that I feel should continue, but Tacoma is not done with its growth patterns. One project that I haven't really mentioned as of yet is over at Point Ruston. There's one developer who is starting to finish the rest of their build out, and their build out is going to be 5 buildings. 5 buildings. And so when you look at that, even that's still not enough. because these are all going to be several stories tall, typical of what you see over in Point Ruston, mid-rise developments. That area has a pretty dense population. If you look at just the size of it, it's a very densely packed area, and probably arguably the most dense neighborhood in the city, if not the most, coming close to it. But even with the addition of those 5 buildings and the population it's going to put out there, you're still not quite making much of a dent. The projects going on in the Dome District and kind of in the Brewery District, you're chipping away, but it's not enough to really abate that. There's a lot of people that have either moved here, planning to move here in the next couple of weeks, couple of months, and a lot of those people are staying with friends. There are so many people who are staying with friends that they know or people that they know, right? Those are people who are still looking for places to live. You have a lot of that. So while this whole new idea of low scale is great, because it can be anything from having a what's called a mother-in-law's space. You can have a garage that you've converted, and as long as you have a bathroom and a kitchen and running water and electric, then you're in the house. It works. That's also a part of that too. But it also goes up to include duplexes. I think all those are great points and great starts, a great starting point, because it allows people who are not developers to be able to kind of help in the situation. You could take always a place like the man cave and convert it into a living space for someone. You can always have done that because it's attached to the house. But now the detached, that has been for over a year now, where you can actually take a detached space, convert it out, flip it out, if you will, and that can be someone's living space. But that hasn't really taken off as much as what the city would like, because it takes a lot of money to do that. And a lot of homeowners just don't have that financial ability. But by allowing developers now to go into single family neighborhoods and they don't have to worry about any sort of zoning regulation, they can say, you know what, this is going to be a duplex. Or this is going to be, a townhome project that's going to have basically 3 townhomes and they're 2 stories tall. It changes things. It allows for more development to happen in terms of density in areas that normally would not have passed muster. They would have said, no, you can't do that. We'll see what happens. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people that are not happy. It's not going to lower the price of homes, which I know a lot of people are asking. The more houses you build, the more affordable it's going to be. I disagree with that, right? The affordability price, the market determines the rate. You're not going to have, unless there's a major, major issue, you're not going to have a point where Tacoma's rents go down and keep going down. They're going to pretty much either stay where they are or maybe bobble a little bit. But here, because the price is already pretty low in terms of the market, in terms of the area, you're going to continue to see the price go up, 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 because we have a pretty good distance to carry ourselves as opposed to places like Seattle. And even if you look at King County, their apartments on average are more expensive than down here. Our rentals are going up much faster, at a faster clip. Our home prices are going up much faster at a faster clip. Where other areas are kind of, again, bobbing up and down in the water, Tacoma is still racing up. There has not been a shortage in the housing prices. People who literally bought a house for $300,000, their house is now at, $600,000 easily. So the prices here are continuing to move upward, and they do so quite easily. So as long as that's the case, as long as Seattle and Bellevue and those places continue to be farther and farther out of reach, and even places like Snohomish County, even all of Snohomish County is more expensive than down here, by far, $100,000 difference. So that limits people moving into places like Everett, because they're like, why move to Everett and deal with all the traffic issues of Linwood and all of that? Why move up there when I can move to Tacoma or to Pierce County? It's a much bigger county, I believe. I got to check that. But why move there when I can move to a city? I mean, Bellevue is a city, don't get me wrong. But you get to have a much bigger city in Tacoma. So why would I want to move there versus up here in Snohomish? SNOH. Let's see. Let's see which one is bigger. So I just said that, and I'm not really sure. Yeah, 827. Let's see. Just to verify. Actually, no. Snohomish County is a little bit bigger than Pierce County. So, again, a lot of people are saying, why go up there, pay more, deal with all the congestion when I can move down to Tacoma? That is why we're in such a pickle. And the way that the city has done some things recently has been pretty smart. I can't criticize that. Some are thinking that there's more that can be done as far as homelessness, but I think that the city is trying to figure that part out actively. You know what I mean? Actively trying to figure that out. So I think that we can get to a certain point to where things will be better. You're never going to solve all homelessness. But I think that there are ways that hopefully the city will continue to go down and it will fix it. I don't think that we're going to be in the same position that Seattle is in. I hope not, but it doesn't take much to get there. Homelessness has become much more of a problem here. Just in the last couple of weeks, it's become more of an issue than before. So it's a growing crisis, right? Just like a lot of other things. And I don't envy city leadership right now at all, because there's so many different things that they have to pretty much combat all at one time. But anyhow, tell me what your thoughts are about this whole low scale zoning that is actually going on in Tacoma that's approved, what that means. I still have not heard anything about the TIF district, if that's even been approved, or the whole designation of having a TIF, which is tax incremental financing. If that happens, major changes are going to happen downtown if they choose that as their area, and typically most places do. Major changes. I would imagine them also using the east side or something like that as a TIF district area as well. It really and truly is for areas that are kind of depressed. You know, a lot of downtown and parts of the city are listed as opportunity zones. That zoning designation is great because a lot of developers only build in opportunity zones. They get their funding and everything else to do that. So a lot of Tacoma also has these opportunity zones, many of which are downtown, and that is even more encouraging. So when you add opportunity zones as well as TIF financial districts, as well as this whole zoning designation that they're doing, downtown Tacoma is going to be pretty interesting in the next little bit of time. We'll see what happens. But anyhow, tell me what your thoughts are. Be sure to join the Discord down in the description box below. What do you think of this new camera? You know, again, the sound's not going to be amazing. I'll work that out and try to do what I can. Be sure to join the Discord as I mentioned. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, and comment. And until next time, I will see you. Take care.